Hello dear class 11 students, and welcome back to this online tutoring alternative English class with me, Esther Zutsobio. Today we are going to learn another interesting and humorous story from the prose section, which is titled The Luncheon by William Somerset Maugham. Now, about the author of the lesson, William Somerset Maugham. He was an English playwright, novelist, and short story writer. He was among the most popular writers of his era and reputedly the highest paid author during the 1930s. He did not want to become a lawyer like the other members of the family. So he trained and qualified as a physician. His first novel, which was named Lisa of Lambeth, this was the first novel that he wrote. And this first novel sold out so rapidly that it influenced him so much, so he gave up medicine. He gave up medicine and gave his total time in writing, to write full time. The Luncheon, the lesson that we're going to do today, is a famous short story of William Somerset Maugham. The word luncheon means a midday meal, which is also referred to a light snack. The small meal that we take during the day. This short story is about a lady of 40 years who is a fan of his writing, and this was the time when the author has just started writing. She wins the author's favor and she expresses her wish to meet the author at a high-class restaurant for a luncheon. William beautifully exposes the fake, modest eating habits of the middle-class people with a touch of humor. So I'm sure that you're excitedly waiting to see what's given there in the lesson. So let's dive into our lesson now. We'll be discussing about a brief summary of the lesson. So a lady had met the author during the interval of the play in a theater. At first, the author couldn't recognize this lady. Then the lady started relating an incident about them 20 years ago. She started narrating the incident when the author and she met 20 years ago at a restaurant. Then the author remembered, yes, it was 20 years ago. The author was living in Paris in a small apartment and was earning barely enough to survive. The lady is a fan of his writings, and she wins the author's favor and expresses her wish to meet him at a high-class restaurant called Fayette's in Paris. Now, Fayette's was a high-class restaurant, and William at that time was earning barely enough for himself. Fayette's was a high-class restaurant, and William at that time was earning barely enough for himself that he had never even thought of visiting that expensive restaurant. But then the author was flattered and imagines the portrayal of a beautiful, graceful lady in his mind, and he was too young at that time. He was too young to have learned to say no to a woman. He was too young to have learned to say no to the proposal of a woman. So he decided to meet her. The author had just 80 francs in his pocket. Now, what is francs? Francs is a former unit of currency of France. These days, they use euro. So the author had just 80 francs in his pocket. Estimating the cost of a luncheon, which should not cost more than 15 francs, he decided to cut down coffee from his menu so that he could have enough for himself for the next 2 weeks. His meeting was fixed on Thursday at 12:30 through correspondence. When they met, he was surprised to see that the lady was in her 40s and she was very talkative and she was not at all attractive for the author. He was startled when the menu was brought because the prices were higher than he expected. But the lady reassured him, saying, "I never eat anything for luncheon." So keep this in mind. The lady will keep on repeating, "I never eat anything for luncheon." So when the author mentioned this, when the lady mentioned this, the author was relieved. Then, out of courtesy, he insisted that she should order something. Then the lady replied, saying, "I don't eat more than one thing. I think people eat far too much nowadays." And she said, "A little fish perhaps?" And then she ordered for salmon. The waiter asked if she would have something while it was being cooked, and she replied, "No, I never eat more than one thing unless you have a little caviar. I never mind caviar." Then caviar was ordered while salmon was in the process of cooking. Now salmon is a large edible fish much prized for its pink flesh. Caviar is a dish prepared with large fish eggs. And both these items were among the most expensive dishes in the menu of that restaurant. So, on the other hand, the author, William, he just ordered for the cheapest dish in the menu, that is mutton chop. Now, the woman thinks that it is so unwise to eat meat, and she said she wonders how people can expect to work after eating heavy things like chops. So after the meal came the question of drinks. She had ordered for French white wine, saying her doctors won't let her drink anything except champagne. The author turned pale and ordered half a bottle of champagne for her and mentioned casually that his doctor had absolutely forbidden him to drink champagne. Here, the author said this because he couldn't afford the drink for both of them. The woman kept enjoying the meal, chatting about art, literature, and music, while William kept wondering about the bill, because he knows that now the bill of fare was soaring above which he had anticipated. When the waiter had come with the bill, she waved him aside with an air of gesture, and she started ordering for asparagus. Now William's heart sank. He had seen asparagus in shops, and he knew that they were horribly expensive. Yet he had to suppress his emotions. So now, while they waited for the asparagus, panic seized the author. Panic seized him because now it's not a question about how much money he should have left for the month, but the question is, does he have enough money to pay the bill? Thoughts kept reeling through William's mind about how he was going to pay the exorbitant bill. It would be embarrassing to find himself 10 francs short and be obliged to borrow from her. He couldn't bring himself to do that. Perhaps he would put his hands inside his pocket and with a dramatic cry start up, saying it had been picked. Or the last option will be to leave his watch and say he would come back and pay later. So all these thoughts were going on in his mind while the lady kept on enjoying all the expensive dishes and meal and kept on chatting, saying this and that. All the same, she kept on saying that she never eat anything for luncheon but just a bite. The author was past caring now, so he ordered coffee for himself and ice cream and coffee for her. And then, to his bad luck, the waiter walked up to the table with a large basket full of fresh huge peaches, and she absent-mindedly took one, stating that, "I have just had a snack and I shall enjoy a peach." So the woman who kept on announcing that I never eat anything for luncheon, the woman who kept on saying this had only salmon, caviar, champagne, asparagus, ice cream, coffee, and peach. The bill was finally paid, and William found himself with just a few francs for the tip and not a penny left in his pocket for the whole month. Now, when they walked out of the restaurant, the lady advised him again, saying, "Follow my example and never eat more than one thing for luncheon." Then the author replied her with his witty comeback, saying, I'll do better than that. I'll eat nothing for dinner tonight." Then the lady replied him, saying, "Humorist!" She cried gaily, and jumping into the cab, she again said, "You're a humorist," and saying that, she drove away. Now, that incident took place 20 years back. The author bumped into her at the theater the other day, and he noticed that the woman was obese, weighing 21 stones. 21 stones, converting it into kgs, it comes up to 136 kgs. Therefore, after seeing the woman becoming very fat, William took her obesity as a revenge achieved. So with that, we come to the end of the summary of our lesson. Now let's discuss the theme of the lesson. As we can see from the story, the theme of the lesson is appearance versus reality. The main focus of the story is in the appearance versus reality. The speaker, in the beginning, wishes and imagines that his blind date, would be a beautiful, graceful woman, but she appears as a surprising blast, a total opposite of his imagination. And not only her appearance, but she also behaved the total opposite of what she kept on saying. Because she kept on announcing, "I never eat anything for luncheon," but in reality, she was food-loving and a ravenous woman who doesn't even think about the price the speaker would need to pay for the lunch. She features an excellent appetite and gobbles tons of cash too. The irony concealed in her speech helps to develop the theme most. The title, The Luncheon, literally means a light snack. But in the story, this light snack turned into an abundant and expensive meal, an elaborated meal. So this irony makes this lesson, The Luncheon, a comic book story within the true sense. So that's the theme of the lesson. Now, towards the end of our lesson, we see that the author said that he had had his revenge. The author thinks that he had had his revenge in the end. How? The woman takes advantage of the author's naivety and traps him to fulfill her hefty appetite with a luxurious and an elaborated lunch. The lunch had left him penniless. The lunch had left the author penniless. As he remembers, he had a whole month before him and not a single penny in his pocket. However, he consoles himself humorously that he has had his revenge by saying, "Today she weighs 21 stones." He proudly says that the woman is now 136 kgs. The luncheon was a painful ordeal for the author, and he believes that the immortal gods has taken the matter into their own hands and made the woman obese as a punishment. The author does not sympathize with her obesity, but rather decides to accept it calmly as having had his revenge. So students, with that we come to the end of our lesson for today. We'll get back to you in our next video lesson. Until then, stay safe.